into the classroom one morning and told everyone within earshot of her desk that she had gotten her period that day. Now the boys were all walked down the hall to the gym, and there they played dodgeball. She was 2 years younger than my father and 3 years older than her baby sister, Betsy. My Aunt Joy was born in 1916. She was 2 years younger than my father and 3 years older than her baby sister, Betsy. And when she was 8 years old, their mother died. And shortly thereafter, their father left them in the care of her maternal grandmother, Nanny, who was 75 years old when she took on raising the 3 orphans. Now, Nanny was born in the mid-1800s, so keep that in mind. She broke her hip and had to go to the hospital, and the 3 children had to go and stay with a neighbor until Nanny was recovered enough to come and get them. Now, Joy must have been maybe 10, 11 years old when her period started there at the neighbor's house. Remember that Nanny was born in the mid-1800s, and she had been so discreet, like Denise's mother. She had never said a word about menstruation to those girls. Well, between the cramping in her body and the blood that was gushing from her, Joy was persuaded that she, like you, Denise, was dying. Well, she didn't want to be an inconvenience to the neighbor that they were staying with. So she went down to the basement and lay down on the floor to await death in the place that she hoped would be the easiest place to clean up. And the neighbor lady found her there and understood what was happening and told her that this was a natural occurrence and that it would come again. And Joy, in telling this story, would say, "And I was so glad to know because I could share it with my baby sister, Betsy." Now, I was born in 1953, and thank heavens, communication between the generations had gotten better. My mother was given to leaving pamphlets on my bed to tell me about any important things I should know. And sure enough, when I was about 10, 5th grade, they marched the girls down to the library to show them a film called The Story of Menstruation, which, by the way, was produced by Walt Disney for Kimberly Clark, who just happened to manufacture Kotex pads. And in the course of that movie, we girls learned, some of us for the first time, that when this change happened, it gave us a huge responsibility, because from the time we began to bleed, we could be impregnated and bear a child. Now the boys were all walked down the hall to the gym, and there they played dodgeball. I think that's the level of sex education that we still have in America, that the girls are told that it's a great responsibility, and the boys are encouraged to compete with one another to pummel each other with dodgeballs. They gave us each a little box of Kotex, a sample grouping of them to try them on as we needed them. And I took mine home and put it in the top of my closet. I wasn't going to need it again for 2 years. And during the course of that time, I got pummeled with a lot of dodgeballs. Now, come 7th grade, I got a Girl Scout diary at my birthday in the fall. And I kept it that whole year. I still have it now, which means I can tell you that in March of 1966, one of my classmates, a girl who was also the person who told me all the facts of life that were missing from the menstruation movie, came into the classroom one morning and told everyone within earshot of her desk that she had gotten her period that day. I was mortified for her because it was clear from that movie that we were not to mention periods around boys for fear of offending them. According to my diary, she also said that she'd seen a UFO that night, so you can decide for yourself how reliable a narrator she happened to be. In April of that year, my mother bought me a shell, which was one of those sleeveless little pullover tops that were popular at the time. But she took me aside and told me that if I was going to wear it, I needed to shave the hair that was now growing under my arm, and I needed to start wearing deodorant. In that direct way, she informed me that my body was starting to change. Even my smell was changing. And so I shaved those underarms that very night. I waited a month to shave my legs because I wanted to do it when my best friend could do it, because we had made a pact together. Now, there was also hair sprouting from one other part of me, but I was afraid that my mother would tell me to shave it, so I never mentioned that. When school was out, we were free. Grammar school went through 7th grade. The next year, we would go across town to the high school, 8th through 12th grade. We would be called sub-freshmen. Now, it was an important summer to be able to play to your heart's content, but instead, I was herded into a summer school class with some of the other bright children from schools all around Atlanta. It was called Accelerated Summer School, and there they taught us typing, recorder playing, and social studies. Now, why you would punish bright children in this way when they'd rather learn archery, riflery, and craft, I don't know, but they did. The good news is I met 2 girls there. In fact, they're 2 of my dearest friends today. One of them I told the story to this morning over Zoom as a practice. I remember I was in typing class when suddenly, my stomach was really upset. I thought maybe my breakfast wasn't agreeing with me. So I excused myself and went to the girls' room, but nothing came out of me. And I felt a little better, so I went back and I was hunting and pecking and hunting and pecking. Ooh, ooh! When I felt it again, like Denise, I had no words to describe what was happening to me. When I went to the bathroom again, this time I saw red. Peering down between my legs, I watched as a long, bright red pendant of blood lowered itself from my nether reaches, a part of me that I had never explored before. Seeing that blood, I remembered the Kotex movie, and that I was now responsible for possibly bringing life into the world. And I was 12 and a half years old. All I really wanted to do was go home and play with my pet bunny rabbit. Having this unexpected invitation to womanhood and given to me there in that bathroom stall, well, I cried. And then I wiped my tears and I took a bunch of toilet paper and I stuffed it in my underpants, and I went to the school nurse and she called my mom, who came and got me and took me home. She got that box down with the Kotex in it. She showed me how to truss myself up with a little elastic band. There were no wings and no adhesive in that time. And now I was ready to go back into the world without defiling it. In fact, my mother took me to see the movie The Sound of Music, which had a revival that summer. I took a friend with me and we watched that sunny romance, that heroic adventure, and that creepy little song about the marionettes who were yodeling to one another. My mother said nothing else to me that day. And my father gave me no acknowledgement, though he did spend the next 10 years exhorting me not to get pregnant before I got married. I guess going to see The Sound of Music, that was the best I could hope for of the coming of age ceremony in America in 1966. Now, I continued to have menstrual cramps for the next 30 years until at last I went into labor to deliver my first child. Oh, it felt like the mother of all menstrual cramps, but I pushed that child into the world. And 4 years later, I pushed her sister out too. And then my uterus and I seemed to reach some kind of detente because I never had cramps again after that. But I thought, this story has to be told in a better way. Now, when my children reached puberty, I was going through menopause. It is not a pretty vector right there, that crossroads, let me tell you. But I had gotten them age-appropriate books, which I'd read to them very carefully and very tenderly. I'd gotten them moon kits up on the shelf for their first period. I was fully prepared to wash their hands in cornmeal to welcome them to womanhood, and both of them said, "None of that, please, Mom, that's mortifying." They set healthy boundaries to curb my enthusiasm. And though they did come to my croning ceremony a few years after that, unless they brought it up, I have not spoken to them about it again. This thing that women go through, that makes us women, makes us powerful at the same time that sometimes, ooh, it makes us sick. And that's when I found the story that some of you heard earlier. About 2 years ago, I was putting together a program called How Folktales Teach Us to Be Human. And I was looking at the cultures, the animals, the plants, the landscapes of the Carolinas to see what we could learn from these old stories about living in the world that we were born into. So here I found 2 different versions of the story. You know already that it features menstruating women. In the first version, they were called bad luck women. And that, of course, refers to taboos that happen in different places in the world that suggest that a menstruating woman is so powerful she needs to be secluded from the others lest she bring them to harm. That story was collected apparently in 1909 by a white male ethnographer. And the second version I found that was published in 1987 by another white male ethnographer referred to the women as moon sick. And that word stopped me in my track. In the tale, the Great Spirit looked down at human beings and saw that they were not doing very well on this planet that had been given them. They didn't know about what plants to use to heal the sick. They didn't know that they could raise as well as hunt animals. They didn't know how to tend each other's needs. And the Great Spirit took pity on them and so sent one of his spirit clan down to teach them about the things they did not yet know. That spirit man is called Okasta. And when he reached the earth, the first thing he saw was a man shoot an arrow into a deer. He saw the deer drop to the ground. In his spirit form, he got to the deer before the man, and he pulled out the arrow, and he saw it had a pointed stone at the end, and he thought, if this little stick with a pointed end can bring down an animal so strong and swift as a deer, what would it do to me? And so he was afraid of the human beings. He began to gather bits of flint and rock everywhere he found it, and he made himself a coat covered in flint. Okasta means stone coat or flint coat. And in that way he could pass among human beings without any fear of harm from them. But instead of teaching them what he'd been sent to teach them, instead, he sowed discord among these people. He looked down upon them. He did not care to help them. He wanted to be rid of them. And what he did in village after village after village nearly brought the Cherokee people to ruin, turning friends against friends and families against families and villages against villages until they realized that the discourse came to their village whenever the man in the stone coat passed through. And they knew that if they did not destroy him first, he would end life as they knew it. But they did not know of any weapon they had powerful enough to get this spirit man out from amongst them, until one day, 7 moon-sick women, that is, menstruating women, one from each village, went out and placed herself along the road that Okasta was known to pass. She lay there undressed on the ground, bleeding into the earth. And when he passed by, that first woman, he saw her, he was startled and in awe. His heart stuttered just as his foot stumbled, and he went ahead a little weaker. Each time he passed one of these moon-sick women, his feet stumbled beneath him. His heart stuttered within him. He felt weaker and weaker until by the time he had passed that 7th woman, he did not have the power to stand, and he fell to the earth, and his coat came open. And the women got up and walked towards him. One lifted up a sourwood branch that had a pointed end and drove it into his heart. And his blood began to flow into the earth. But with the flowing of his blood, so went the hatred that he had and the fear that he had for humanity. And he said to them in the softest of voices, "Bring your clans here. I have much to teach you before I return to the sky. Build sour wood boughs and lay me on it, and I will teach you what I was sent to teach you, and then burn the wood, and I will sing my way back into the sky." And so the men came, and the women came, and the children came, and Okasta taught them what they needed to know about finding the medicine plants, about raising and hunting animals, and about tending one another in the way that they should. They learned from him how to take care of the earth. And then he grew still, and they lit the fire. And as the flames rose, he rose up singing back into the sky. And the earth was saved because of 7 moon-sick women who had the power to make him whole again. I wouldn't call them moon-sick. I'd call them moon-strong.